Let's talk about how you should be dribbling the basketball, and it's probably not what you're being taught by a lot of coaches. A lot of coaches teach things that aren't necessarily the way the best ball handlers dribble the basketball, and there's some big keys you'll want to pay attention to. And if you get those keys in place, it's going to make a massive impact on your handles. I've seen it firsthand with the players I train all the time. It's going to allow you to create more space for shots, get to the lane for easy buckets, and a ton more. So here's what coaches usually teach their players, and I'm not saying it's wrong or you should never do this, so hear me out on the whole video. But what most coaches teach players is to always pound the dribble, which I don't have a problem with pound dribbling, and they also teach to always keep that dribble at like knee height, waist height at the very most. A lot of times though you'll hear coaches say keep it lower, keep it below the knees. Now, that's all great stuff. It's good to have that in your arsenal. You absolutely need to have that ability to pound the dribble so you can go on your moves more quickly, and you have to be able to keep that dribble low for high traffic situations, and those taller defenders keep the ball below them. Here's the problem though. If you watch the best players in the NBA, they typically are going to dribble the basketball around waist height a lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time, and they're also going to dribble it up at around shoulder height from time to time. Now, hear me out again. I know a lot of you thinking like, that's going to get the ball stolen, right? Because a lot of coaches teach their players having it up that high makes it easier to get the ball stolen. Doesn't account for two factors, and there's a big thing you need to understand with this. I'll get to that near the end of the video, that you need to understand with this. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to start dribbling at shoulder height. That could create a problem for you if you're not paying attention to what I'm going to give you throughout the entire video. So, when you're dribbling and you watch the best NBA ball handlers, a lot of times they'll dribble up at shoulder height. There's a couple things you want to have with this. You want to make sure that you're floating that dribble, okay? So we don't want to just be dribbling up here really quick. I mean, that is an option, but the way the best players usually dribble is they're going to dribble it up around shoulder height to waist height, and sometimes they'll mix in lower dribbles. But this particular dribble is one they'll use a lot, where they'll put it here and they'll float it in their hand. Now, here's the big thing. Most coaches say if you dribble up here, you're going to get the ball stolen, right? The key is that you're floating it with the basketball in your hand, not this. That's not what we want to do, because now the ball is super exposed. But I can get that same kind of air time on the dribble and keep my hand on the basketball. Now, if I'm floating the basketball here and you're my defender and you try to steal it, boom, I can whip it behind my back. I can drop down and do it between the legs, any of that stuff, because the ball's in my hand. Right now, I can't maneuver the basketball, right? Right now, I can't. That happens in every single dribble motion. It's out of my hand, it's in my hand. It's out of my hand, it's in, right? So if you can maximize the amount of time the basketball is in your hand, you can maneuver it more. Now, that's what makes this so powerful for NBA players. They come up to their defender and they'll have the basketball in their hand, and now they can react to what the defender does, number one. But number two, big problem is if you're always dribbling down here and always pounding it, it's hard to synchronize that timing with your foot movement, right? If you're dribbling fast, now you kind of have to synchronize every foot movement with that dribble movement. So it doesn't allow your feet quite as much freedom to move, because you have to wait for the basketball to get in your hand, because you're boom, 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 right? But these players in the NBA, when they float the dribble, I can take like a lot of steps in that dribble. I can cover a lot of ground in that dribble. Your feet aren't nearly as free to move if you're always doing those low, hard pound dribbles. So before I get into the third reason you would want to add this to your game and the things to look for, and then also the things that you have to have in place for this to work well for you, we got to talk about something I know a lot of coaches and players have a question about. Is a lot of people think if you float the basketball up here that's a carry and it's illegal. So let's debunk a couple myths and then also go over what is a carry, because a lot of players, they see NBA players do this floating type dribble and then they try to do it themselves and they do end up carrying. So first of all, dribble height doesn't matter. You can dribble as high as you want legally. Now, keep in mind, if you're dribbling above shoulder height, like at head height, some refs might call it a carry just because it looks weird. Other thing to keep in mind, though, is you can float that basketball in your hand as long as you want, and it's completely legal as long as two things are not happening, and these are the things you'll want to look out for. Number one, you can't palm the basketball mid-dribble. I can't palm it right now. My hands are too slippery from the cold weather here, but if you can palm the basketball mid-dribble, don't, because that's illegal, okay? I encourage players to try to get that kind of a grip on the basketball the second it comes into their hand, because now you'll have better control. So just give it that palm type grip the split second it touches your hand to get good control, but then don't just palm it and hold it. That's gonna get called every time. But the bigger thing and the second thing that more players get called for is this type of a carry, where they're putting their hand under the ball. Now, a couple things you want to look at with this is, number one, a lot of players in the NBA, they'll have their hand like here for their setups, okay? That's borderline. Basically, the rule is halfway down. If more than half of your hand is in that position on the basketball, that's going to be called a carry. If I just slide it up a little here, I'm probably good to go, okay? So that's one thing you'll want to look out for when you're doing these float type dribbles. The third thing a lot of people don't think about with these higher dribbles is a lot of defenders nowadays, what do? They wait for your crossover to steal it down low. If I'm playing defense and I know my guy's going to throw a crossover on me, I'm going to wait for it here to try to pick his pocket, right? A lot of times they'll wait for you at waist height, or they'll wait for you to attack, and they have an idea of the positioning where the basketball is going to be. A lot of the best pro players, they use these higher dribbles, number one, to give them that extra airtime to sell fakes and things like that, but also to put the ball in spaces where the defender doesn't expect, to do throw crossovers where they can cover more ground from that crossover. They'll do it to put the basketball in positions to attack with their regular dribble past the defender where they don't see it coming. Because if they're waiting down here and you put the basketball there, that doesn't really give you an advantage, does it? Now, here's the big key. You can't just start dribbling up at this height and not have good control over the basketball while you're doing so. So you want to develop your ball control while using this type of a dribble height. You can't just go about this any such way. You want to make sure you're doing it in a way that's effective and that will work well in games and doesn't get the ball stolen. I'm going to have a link in the description down below and also pin it to the top comment. That's going to take you to a program I have that's going to help you take this to the next level. Dribble more like the pros are. You'll definitely want to check that out. It'll help you a ton. Click that subscribe button, the bell icon, and the like button, and I will see you in the program page next.